you so much for having me. It's really great to be at my first Lesbians Who Tech. So first of all, I'd like to make sure that my friends who are deaf, who are watching the live stream, can understand me. So if I could get the interpreter to please come over here so that she'll be visible on the live stream. Excellent. So today I want to tell you about one of the most awful experiences of my career as a software engineer and what I learned from it. So this is a real story. In 2014, I was working in the Google Cambridge office near Massachusetts. And I thought I was a senior engineer. I thought I knew my stuff, right? I'd been on 5 teams. I'd been on the tech lead position of 2 of them, including being the tech lead of reliability for Google Play Books. So I thought it was hot stuff, right? But it wound up being not quite the case in terms of me knowing the technical skills, but not knowing the interpersonal skills I needed to succeed. So I was brought on to join a team. And the team was Google Flight Search, who Google had acquired about 3 years beforehand. And I was asked by my boss at the time, Liz, can you help this team out? They really need some help from you. And that was true. They did have a bunch of problems. They had problems like being buried in operational load, of spending all of their time churning away at tickets and none of their time working on making the system better. They also wound up being in a situation of having really bad relations with the product development software engineers who were shipping the features. And they also wound up being in a situation of missing key skills of software development that they needed to automate the system to make it better. So enter me. I was going to come to the rescue and help them, right? I thought I could fix these things if I told them exactly what they were doing wrong, then everything would magically become better, right? Well, slow down a second, because what actually happened was I ran into a brick wall. I ran into a brick wall because people stopped listening to me, because people didn't trust me. And it wound up being a situation where I went home from work every day and I was crying every single day. That was really sad. So the key thing that happened was I was missing the management skills. I was missing the interpersonal skills that I needed to succeed in order to influence my peers and also to make sure that I was getting the effective support from my management chain that I needed. So this hopefully sets the stage for why you should care about this subject, because as Arlen said yesterday, it winds up being the case that many of us don't get second chances, right? We only get our first chance. So I want you all to learn from my experience of failing so that you don't mess that up and so that you never have to ask for that second chance. So this is what I want you to take away today. I want you to take away these 4 things. I want you to think about what are the common problems that teams face that they have to deal with. How can you step up to help solve them, or at least ask for someone to help you? How can you communicate with your peers and with your manager? And how can you tell whether your manager is doing the best possible job that they can to help you? So what do I mean by management skills? Well, we can start thinking about it maybe in terms of what do engineering managers do? But management doesn't necessarily have to mean that your job title says on your business card, I am an engineering manager, right? Instead, you can think about management as a way of guiding teams, as a way of making teams and people more effective. Because it's a skill. It's something that you can practice, and it's something that you can learn. And it's something that anyone can do, that anyone can learn. And that's true even if they don't have manager on their business card. So today, I want you to learn these management skills because you may be in a situation where you see a problem on your team and you want to make it better. So I want you to feel empowered to make that so, to make it better, rather than hoping someone else solves the problem for you. By the way, these skills don't necessarily have to come from work. For instance, I practiced my management skills leading a group of 15,000 volunteers in a video game. There's a separate talk about that. You can watch it on YouTube later. So in order to think about this problem of what's management, maybe we can go back to what problems do engineering managers care about? What are they accountable for making sure happen on their teams? And these are the 4 things I think engineering managers care about. First of all, they care about making sure that their teams and their projects are healthy. That means looking after the career development of every engineer on their team by mentoring them and coaching and sponsoring them. It also means that they have to think about the climate of psychological safety on the team. Are people able to effectively work together so that they're set up for success? Secondly, it's important for managers to really make sure that everyone is on the same page about what are we doing and why is it important. Because if we're not in agreement on these things, we're going to wind up working in opposite directions from each other rather than making forward progress. You really have to set the priorities and direction as a manager. Managers also have to think about what are the risks to my project and to my people. Because burnout does happen, and it's better to ask people, you know what, slow down a second, take a day off. I'd rather not have you suddenly go on medical leave for 3 months. I'd rather have a sustainable, slower pace over time. Managers also have to think about technical blockers and other forms of risk. What happens if this goes wrong? How can I make sure that my team is still going to be able to deliver? And if there is going to be failure, to communicate about it in advance rather than surprising people. Fourthly, managers have to think about catching and dispatching exceptions. Things like, what if there's someone in your team who is really, really struggling? How can you help them so the team doesn't become demoralized and so that individual doesn't become demoralized? And how can you make sure that even if the company's priorities shift, how to make sure that you're doing the right thing for the team, either by pushing back and saying our work is still important, or saying and communicating to the team, this is why the company's goals have shifted and this is why we need to change what we're doing. So when we think about how we might solve some of these problems as an engineering manager, we might think about some skills that we might want to use in order to effectively accomplish these goals. Let's talk about the first one of these, which is gathering information. Because it doesn't make sense to take action unless you know what's going on. So managers have to be really great at listening to people, and not just listening to the factual content of what they're saying, but emotions. What are they worried about? What are they not telling you? And making sure that you understand why someone is acting the way that they are, so that you can change their behavior. That's the next thing that managers need to think about, is how do you persuade other people, right? How do you make sure that other people are getting behind what you're asking them to do for you? And frequently it winds up being helpful to use the framework of situation, behavior, and impact to address this, right? To think about contextualizing for people, what is the thing you're asking them to do differently? What would you like them to do differently? And how will it change the way that the team works for the better if they change that? And then third, managers need to provide visibility. That means that managers need to communicate all of that information that they're gathering rather than hoarding it all to themselves. Because effective teams come when people have the ability and the access to information that they need in order to do their jobs. And also, managers need to provide visibility for the accomplishments of people on their team. Because it's really important when people are able to shine, when people recognize your accomplishments and your effort. So none of these things really require having the manager title. That's the catch of this talk, is I talked about all of these things as being the engineering manager's responsibility, but it winds up being the case that it's much easier for an engineering manager if they know that their team has these skills and can help them with it. These don't have to be things that are only done by the engineering manager on the team. So let's talk about what you can do today to think about how to manage sideways, how to influence your peers. Firstly, I want you to think about how do you build your network? Who are you talking to? Do you have their trust? Because it's really roundabout and it takes forever if the only way to get things done is to go up to your lowest common manager and back down. That takes forever, right? That's not a good way of accomplishing business. So instead, think about what it means in order to be clear and consistent in what you're delivering and to get kind of written promises of these are the things that I'm going to do, these are the things that I'm going to actually have people work on with me, right? To make sure that you are actually solving problems that people are interested in having solved and listening to their needs, and you're working together. And then next, it's important to be considerate and respectful. It's important to be in a situation where people think that you really value them as people, right? That people know that you trust them and that they're willing to work together with you in the future. Because ordering people around is not really an effective way of accomplishing things, right? It's much better to exchange favors with people. It's much better to collaborate with people. So now let's talk about managing up. And I don't just mean managing up in the sense of, making sure your manager knows what your accomplishments are. Instead, what I want to talk about is how can you make the relationship with your manager better? I want you to answer these 4 questions for yourself. First of all, clicker problems. Is your manager helping you grow, right? Do you know what you need to do next to get to where you want to be in your career? And is that true not just for you, but for the rest of your team? Is there anyone in your team who's stuck and struggling? Is your manager noticing that and helping fix that? And is your team making progress as a whole? Secondly, I want you to think about whether your manager is noticing conflicts, ideally preventing them before they happen. But when a conflict does happen, is your manager actually responsible for helping resolve that conflict? And third, is your manager actually communicating? Do you have the information that you need in order to get your job done? Do you feel like you have a clear line of communication with your manager and feel that you can, in fact, trust your manager and be able to give them feedback? One of the most difficult things about being an engineering manager is you don't often get honest feedback. You don't often get signals about how you're doing or how you can make your reports' lives better. So if you as a report step up and give your manager feedback, that's really helpful for being able to get your manager doing the things that are most effective for you. Again, situation behavior impact can help there. So I hope you've learned some of the problems that affect teams, how to step up if you need to, or to get someone's attention, how to communicate with your teammates and your manager, and how to evaluate whether your manager is doing a good job. So let's go back to my story. It was now 2015. I was really, really burnt out. But I thought long and hard about what is it that I wanted to be doing? What did I want to learn from that experience of having failed at my poor management skills? And what I realized was that I wanted to take that second chance that my employer was giving me and double down and really focus on learning those management skills and focus on that full time. So I learned from my mistakes and learned all of these lessons that I just told you. And I wound up becoming an engineering manager full-time for 2 years. And I grew from that experience so much that eventually I was recognized and I was promoted in my position as a manager. So today I'm standing before you as a staff engineer, where I was a senior engineer before. And my hope for you is that these lessons will enable you to not make these mistakes in your own career so that you also can become staff and principal engineers in the future. So thank you so much.